Woodland, Washington, October 2006. The pale autumn sunlight slid through the kitchen window, casting a faded gold streak across the chipped wooden counter. The house was quiet, so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. But it wasn't the kind of silence born of peace. It was the kind carved by absence, by a grief too old for screaming and too familiar to name. Angela Palmer, 41, stood by the sink, hands hovering above a ceramic bowl. She had just cracked the third egg into it, the motion automatic from years of habit. But these breakfasts, for the past 3 years, were just empty rituals. No child's giggle echoed through the hallway. No request for bear-shaped pancakes or strawberry milk. Morgan, her little girl, with light brown hair and wide, wondering eyes, used to wake the house with joy. But today, like every one of the 1,000 days before, the house stayed still, as if Morgan had never existed, or worse, as if the world had decided to forget she ever did. The phone rang, a sharp sound slicing through the frozen air. Angela turned slowly. 7:24 a.m. Too early for a casual call. With one hand still sticky from egg yolk, she picked it up. "Miss Palmer, this is Detective Daniel Cole, Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office. I'm sorry to call this early, but we need you to come to the Skookumchuck Marsh, south of Woodland. There's something we believe may be connected to Morgan's case." The words shattered her breath. "You found her?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "We found what's left. Small bones. And some fabric. But I'd rather you come verify before we go any further." Angela didn't remember letting the ceramic bowl fall, but it hit the floor with a hard crash. She didn't look down. 3 years of false hope, 3 years of torment. And now, with one call, it might all be over. Or it might just be beginning, in the cruelest way imaginable. Angela Palmer drove along the wet dirt road leading south of Woodland, Washington, through the thick morning mist and towering Douglas firs. She had taken this road once before 3 years ago, when the town and police scoured the forest and marshlands near Skookumchuck after Morgan vanished. But this time, it wasn't hope that accompanied her, it was dread, as if she was approaching a truth she hadn't dared to believe in anymore. As her car turned on to the muddy path that led into the marsh, the scene that unfolded made her chest tighten. A line of police and forensic vehicles, yellow crime scene tape stretched between moss-covered willows, flashing lights pulsing faintly through the fog, and figures in white hazmat suits moving with purpose around a focal point near the water's edge. She hadn't even stepped out of the car when a familiar figure approached, Detective Daniel Cole, the man who had been with Morgan's case since day one. He opened her door with slow, deliberate motion, his eyes heavy with caution. "Thanks for coming, Angela," he said, voice low but steady. "What did you find?" she asked, lips barely moving. "Come with me, but—" "I have to warn you, this is going to be hard." They crossed the muck to the cordoned-off area. In the center, placed on a blue tarp, was something so out of place it seemed almost surreal, a vintage kitchen oven from the 1960s, battered and caked in mud, but still showing hints of its original cherry-red enamel. Its door was sealed with gray industrial adhesive, thick and crudely applied, but firm. "We found it this morning," Cole explained. "After last week's floods, the water receded a few feet. It was buried nearly a meter under the muck. Someone clearly meant to hide it, and the door was sealed so it couldn't be opened." Angela didn't reply. Her eyes were drawn to the adjacent evidence table where several transparent bags were lined up neatly. Inside were small bones, too small to belong to an adult, and scraps of scorched fabric, red velvet, with delicate white lace trim. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her knees gave way. It was Morgan's birthday dress, the one she called her princess dress, the one she insisted on wearing everywhere, the one Angela had to hide just to wash. "No," she whispered, then screamed, "No!" She collapsed into the cold, wet ground, clawing at the earth as if she could dig time back. Around her, the forensic team froze in silent respect, giving her space to fall apart. Her cries echoed through the morning fog, reaching even the far-off edges of the swamp, where indifferent birds carried on above the still water. A male voice broke through the silence, strained and trembling. "Angela. God, Angela." She looked up through tear-blurred vision to see Mark Palmer, her ex-husband, Morgan's father, pushing past the police tape, his face stricken with horror. He was still in his work uniform, a red vest with Palmer's hardware embroidered on it. "Hold him back," an officer called. "I heard it on the radio. They found remains. That's my daughter," Mark choked out. Cole raised a hand. "Let him through. He's the father." Mark rushed to Angela's side and dropped to his knees, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We'll get through this," he whispered. "Just like we promised her, I swear." Angela didn't push him away. She let herself lean into him, into a familiarity that now served as a thin shield against unbearable truth. In that moment, they were not exes. They were simply Morgan's parents, bound by pain and a child lost to something far worse than imagination. Detective Cole knelt beside them, voice gentle. "I'm sorry, but I need to walk you through the next steps. We'll run DNA tests, but given the bone size and the fabric, the likelihood is very high this is Morgan." "How long until we know for sure?" Mark asked, still holding Angela close. "Preliminary results in about 72 hours. Full forensic analysis will take longer. We're also checking the oven itself for trace evidence." "We need to review everything," Mark said, turning to Angela. "Go back through the case files. Maybe something we missed. With this new evidence, we might see it differently." Angela gave a faint nod, tears and mud streaking her face. "I have the files at my house." "I'll follow you," Mark said quickly. "Let's go through them together." They rose from the mud, leaving behind the sealed oven and the hush of the swamp, unaware that what waited in those old files would lead them toward the darkest corner of their nightmare. Angela Palmer's house sat tucked away at the end of Maple Drive, a brown wood-paneled home from the 1970s with a low roof and a modest backyard framed by a white fence. 3 years earlier, this was the place where Morgan had vanished, while playing alone on the swing set in the yard, as Angela folded laundry inside the side room utility area. At the time, it was just an ordinary afternoon. But the moment Angela stepped outside and saw that Morgan was no longer there, time split into two, before and after. Now, she opened the door with mud-streaked hands and stepped into the home that memory had turned into a mausoleum. Every corner breathed Morgan's presence. Her scribbled drawings still clung to the fridge with cartoon magnets. The kitchen doorframe still bore the pencil marks tracking her growth month by month. A box of unopened Cinnamon Stars cereal still sat on the pantry shelf. Angela had never had the heart to throw it away. Everything had been preserved exactly as it was, as if, by sheer will, she could rewind the world to the moment before it all went wrong. Mark stepped in behind her, his eyes quietly scanning the space. He didn't say a word. Instead, he placed a hand on the back of a dining chair, then turned toward the kitchen. "I'll make some coffee," he said softly. Even after 3 years of divorce, he still moved around the kitchen like he had never left. He remembered where the mugs were, the filters, the coffee grounds. No questions asked. Angela pulled open the drawer by the dining table and took out a weathered manila folder, bulging and worn. Inside were the remnants of an investigation that never found its end: police reports, witness statements, search grids marked on hand-drawn maps, photographs, even photocopied letters of support from strangers. She had read every single page hundreds of times, looking for a clue everyone else had missed. Mark returned with 2 mugs, placing one beside her hand. He sat across from her, opening to the very first page. The incident report from October 15, 2003. "Morgan was playing in the backyard. You were doing laundry," he read aloud, almost ritualistically. "You checked on her every 10 to 15 minutes, Angela added, voice rough. "Last I saw, she had her doll set up for a tea party beneath the plum tree." "At 3:30 p.m., you went out again and she was gone," Mark continued. "The back gate was open. No sign of forced entry." "I locked that gate. I always locked it." Angela's voice trembled. It was the sentence she had repeated to herself and to detectives countless times. Mark reached across the table and gently took her hand. "No one blames you, Angela. Whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. They'd been watching. They planned it. We talked to everyone, every neighbor, every delivery driver, every utility worker who had ever come by the street." "Maybe we need to look at it differently now," Mark said slowly, eyes lingering on a photo of Morgan smiling brightly. "With what we found this morning, that oven, maybe someone had been watching us for a long time. And if that's true, they could still be nearby." Angela looked up at him, her eyes rimmed red. But for the first time in 3 years, there was a glimmer in them, not just of grief, but of suspicion, and of resolve. The next morning, Angela woke from a restless sleep, her head heavy and aching. She sat alone in the living room, staring at the case files still spread across the dining table. Morning light filtered through the window, illuminating a photograph of Morgan smiling in her red velvet dress from her 6th birthday party. Scribbled in pencil at the corner of the photo were the words Princess Morgan. The coffee in her mug had gone cold, but she didn't notice. Her mind was fixed on the oven, the red one buried in the mud, and the strange sense of familiarity that struck her when she saw its enamel. It wasn't just shock. She had seen that shade of red before, not in a swamp, but in a kitchen. She opened her old laptop, the fans humming as it booted slowly. As soon as it came alive, she called Detective Cole on his direct line. "Palmer here," she said without greeting. "I need the photos of the oven, close-ups if you have them." There was a pause on the other end. "What's going on, Miss Palmer?" "I don't know exactly. It's a feeling. But I need to look at it carefully. I think I've seen it before." "All right," Cole replied. "I'll email them. 6 shots from different angles." Angela printed all of them, the colors slightly distorted by her old inkjet printer but still clear enough. She laid them across the table, studying every detail, the faded cherry-red enamel, the curved chrome handles, and the manufacturer's tag near the bottom. Some of the lettering had worn off, but she could still read it. GE Americana, model GS 1964. Her breath caught. That shade of red? It wasn't fire engine bright or dull burgundy. It was a very specific tone. Candy apple red, a color rarely chosen, and even more rarely preserved after 40 years. It didn't look like something you'd use. It looked like something you'd collect. And in a small town like Woodland, not many people had a passion for vintage kitchenware. Angela remembered there were a few appliance shops in town that specialized in antiques. Without hesitation, she threw on a jacket, slipped the photos into her bag, and left the house. Her first stop was Modern Appliance on Main Street. The young clerk glanced at the pictures and shook his head. "That's before my time, ma'am. Try Retro Kitchen down on Oak. The owner there knows her stuff." At Retro Kitchen, a small storefront with a faded wooden sign reading "Open Wed Sat Only." The owner, a woman in her 40s, examined the photos under a magnifying glass. "Definitely 1960s. That Art Deco-style handle gives it away. GE made a run of those. But I mostly deal in 50s models. If you want someone who can really help, you should talk to Harold over at Handy's Appliance Repair. He's a walking encyclopedia." Angela didn't waste a second. Handy's was a narrow building wedged between 2 storage units on the edge of town. The lawn out front had gone wild. A rusted sign creaked above the door. The moment she stepped in, a bell chimed, and the air hit her with the smell of oil, dust, and aging metal. Behind the counter, an elderly man with thick glasses hunched over a disassembled blender. He looked up. "What can I help you with?" he asked, voice gravelly. "I'm looking for information on this model," Angela said, handing over the photos. "GE Americana, red, model GS 1964. The man paused, squinting. "Oh yeah, I know this one. Candy Apple Deluxe, made between 64 and 67. Top of the line back then. Not many left. Where'd you see it?" Angela hesitated. "It's part of a police investigation." Harold's expression shifted. He studied the photo again. "Funny. I remember selling one just like this, maybe 3.5 years ago, People don't usually come looking for these, so it stuck with me. Angela's heart pounded. Do you remember exactly when? Harold got up, shuffled over to a dusty wooden shelf, and pulled down a thick ledger. He flipped through it carefully, stopping at April 2003. Here, April 18, sold a G Americana Red, paid cash, $450. 5 months before Morgan disappeared. Do you remember who bought it? She asked, voice trembling. Cash sale, so no name needed, but I remember the guy. Middle-aged, brown hair, very particular, asked all kinds of questions, maximum temperature, heat retention, door seal. Most folks just want these for decoration. Angela took a photo of the ledger with her phone. Thank you. You've been incredibly helpful. She stepped out of the shop, her pulse racing. Someone bought that exact oven at the exact right time and asked the exact wrong questions. Questions no one would care about, unless they had something to hide. That afternoon, Angela sat alone in her kitchen, the fading daylight making the files on the table seem almost blurry. She couldn't take her eyes off the photo she had taken of Harold's ledger. The blue-inked line read, April 18, 2003, G.E. Americana, Candy Apple Red, $450. Cash. That date blinked in her mind like a warning light. She tried to stay rational. Cole had warned her, lots of collectors out there, it's not enough to go on. But the overlap was too precise, same model, same color, same window of time. And those questions about heat retention and door seals, they weren't questions from a casual collector. They were questions from someone planning something. Angela decided to call Mark. Despite the divorce, he was still Morgan's father. He had the right to know. She dialed. 1 ring, 2, then a pickup. Hello? Mark's voice sounded winded, like he'd been rushing. It's me, Angela. Sorry to call so suddenly. No, it's okay. Is everything all right? Did something happen? I found something about the oven. I took the pictures to a few stores. One of the owners remembered selling that exact model. Same color, same specs. April 2003, 5 months before. A pause. That's quite a coincidence, Mark said slowly. That's what I thought. But the man said the buyer asked really specific questions. About temperature, door seal tightness. Things normal people wouldn't care about. Mark's voice softened, but something about it seemed distant. Angela, you remember that retro kitchen trend back then, right? There were probably dozens of people buying those old models. Angela frowned. Where are you? You sound echoey. A pause. I'm at the cabin, the old one, up by Deer Lake. I just needed to get away from town for a bit after everything this morning. Angela froze. The cabin? I thought you sold that after the divorce. I was going to, had it listed and everything. But when it came time to sign the papers, I couldn't. Too many memories, all those summers with Morgan. You understand, right? Angela didn't answer at first. She remembered clearly how relieved she'd been when he said he was letting the cabin go. That place held too much. Teaching Morgan to swim off the dock, roasting marshmallows at the fire pit, cuddling in the loft during summer storms. But later. The broken promises, the weekends canceled, the suitcase Morgan packed only to be told, next time. And her 5th birthday Mark had promised to come early. He arrived long after the party ended. Morgan had fallen asleep in her red dress, tear-streaked cheeks, still clutching her gift. Angela, you still there? I'm here. Why don't you come up? If you want to talk more, about Morgan, about the case, or just not be alone, I can come get you. It's only 40 minutes. Angela looked around the house. Nothing had changed since Morgan vanished. Case files everywhere. Silence pressing in from the walls. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe she shouldn't be alone tonight. Okay, she heard herself say. If it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all. I'll be there in 45 minutes. After hanging up, Angela walked into Morgan's room. Everything was still as it had been. The unicorn comforter neatly spread, stuffed animals lined up on the shelf, crayon drawings still taped to the pink walls. She sat on the edge of the bed, picked up Morgan's old teddy bear, the one she couldn't sleep without. It still carried a faint scent of baby shampoo and juice boxes. The cabin, she hadn't thought about it in months. They had bought it when Morgan was born, a rustic weekend retreat. Mark had loved it at first, but then work consumed him. Morgan waited by the door for weekends that never came. A horn honked outside. Angela stood, placed the bear back on the bed, grabbed her purse, and locked the front door behind her. Mark stepped out of his truck and opened the passenger door for her. He looked tired, the lines beneath his eyes deeper than before. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "Today, we need to be Morgan's parents. Nothing else." Angela nodded and climbed in. As Mark pulled away from the curb, she noticed how tightly he gripped the wheel, his knuckles pale. She assumed it was the emotion. She didn't yet suspect there might be another reason. Mark Palmer's pickup truck wound its way along a narrow dirt road leading deep into the Mount St. Helens National Forest, where the sunlight filtered only in thin streaks through the dense canopy of Douglas firs. The deeper they went, the darker it grew. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, pine, and something faintly chemical that Angela couldn't quite name. She turned slightly to glance at Mark, intending to ask if he'd recently used cleaning solvents at the cabin, but held her tongue. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt resigned, like two survivors returning to the battlefield. "Do you remember the first time we brought Morgan up here?" Mark asked, eyes on the road. She was 3, kept asking if bears lived in the trees. Angela gave a slight nod, the corners of her mouth twitching. "And I had to shine a flashlight under the cabin so she could check for bear caves." "With full protocol," Mark chuckled, his voice rough. Then she decided she wanted to be friends with them if we ever found one. They shared a soft laugh. For a brief moment, memories of better days flickered between them, offering a fleeting warmth in the midst of their shared grief. Mark continued, recalling how Morgan caught her first fish, begged to keep it as a pet, named it Princess Bubbles, and even created a royal backstory. Angela didn't say much, but her expression softened. The pain didn't ease, but it paused just long enough to breathe. They crossed a creaky wooden bridge over Cedar Creek, where Morgan had once played stick races in the current. As they rounded the last bend, the cabin emerged from behind a thick veil of trees, an A-frame wood structure with a wraparound deck. It looked well-maintained, almost too pristine. Angela noticed the freshly varnished porch, new windows, and aluminum rain gutters, small, meticulous upgrades. Mark had never been that detail-oriented before. "You've kept it up well," she remarked. "I'm here most weekends," Mark replied as he parked. "Started with maintenance. Then I fixed the roof, updated the kitchen. Keeping busy helps me stay sane." They entered the cabin. Inside, it smelled of lemon cleaner and pine wood. The furniture was familiar. The old cloth sofa, the handmade wooden dining table, the low bookcase. But everything was too neat, too curated like a space meant to be seen, not lived in. "Make yourself at home," Mark said, heading into the kitchen. "I'll start dinner. You still like your steak medium rare?" "Yeah." Angela slowly walked through the living room, her fingers brushing the wooden surfaces. She paused at the bookshelf. The children's books were still there on the bottom shelf: Goodnight Moon, The Velveteen Rabbit, Charlotte's Web. The walls held photos she remembered. Morgan holding up a fish, Morgan on Mark's shoulders beneath a lake sunset, Morgan laughing in the autumn woods. But some weren't from the cabin, they were copies of photos she used to keep at home, photos that shouldn't be here. "Bathroom's where it always was," Mark called. "I just changed the fixtures." Angela nodded, then stepped into the hallway. She didn't go to the bathroom. She wanted to peek into the garage. Just for a second. Just to see if Mark still kept the cluttered mess of tools she remembered. The garage door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Inside, the air was cool, heavy with motor oil and old metal. Tools were arranged neatly on pegboards, the workbench spotless. But the far left corner made her stop cold. A large cardboard box, cream-colored, bold GE logo, the words printed clearly, model GS 1964, Americana Series, Candy Apple Red. Her stomach dropped. She stepped closer. The box was crisp, clean. Not worn, not old, not 3 years aged. This was another oven. The same model, the same color, new. Her knees went weak. She reached for the workbench to steady herself, accidentally knocking over a row of screwdrivers. They clattered loudly across the concrete. "Angela!" Mark's voice called out immediately. He appeared in the doorway, concern on his face. "What happened?" She pointed to the box, unable to speak. Mark stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Oh, God. I should have moved that. After this morning, I didn't think. Seeing an oven must have been a shock." Angela couldn't catch her breath. "It's the same. My kitchen oven broke last month," Mark explained quickly. "This was the only model that fit the space. I ordered it. Haven't had time to install it yet. I swear, Angela, I didn't mean." His voice sounded sincere. His face was familiar. It was still Mark, the father, the ex-husband, not a monster. But her thoughts were spiraling. Same model, same timing. And now, another one right here. She told herself she was spiraling, seeing patterns in chaos, overreacting from grief. "You okay?" Mark asked, worried. Angela nodded stiffly. "Come on," he said. "Let me get you some water. You should lie down for a bit." She followed him back into the cabin, her mind racing, repeating the same question over and over. Can coincidence really be this perfect? Angela sat curled up on the old sofa, wrapped in a thin blanket Mark had handed her. The glass of water on the coffee table in front of her remained untouched. The cabin lights cast a dim, amber glow over the room, giving everything a stillness that felt more like a morgue than a home. From the kitchen came the distant clatter of utensils, the faint sizzle of meat in a pan. Ordinary sounds from a world that had ended 3 years ago. A world where Morgan was still alive and nothing had shattered. Mark returned with 2 plates of steak and set them on the dining table. He popped open his second beer and motioned for her to join him. Angela rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She sat down, cut into the steak, blood pooling slightly on the plate just the way she used to like it. But tonight, her mouth was dry, and everything tasted like metal. "You still like it medium rare, right?" Mark asked, offering a small, forced smile. "Yeah," she replied quietly, not meeting his eyes. The silence between them grew heavy, taut as wire. Mark drained his second beer and cracked open another. "You know," he began slowly, "I worked 60, 70 hours a week for years, built that hardware store from nothing, painted the sign by hand, installed every shelf myself, all for our family." Angela said nothing. Her fingers tightened around her fork. Mark took a long swig. "But I guess that wasn't enough. 6 months after the divorce, you were already out with him, at Romano's." Angela looked up. "That has nothing to do with Morgan." "Doesn't it?" he scoffed. "That was where I proposed to you, where we celebrated Morgan's first day of school, and there you were, laughing, holding his hand, wearing that blue dress I gave you for Christmas, while our daughter—" "Mark," Angela cut in, her voice low but firm. "You're drunk." "I'm not drunk." He reached for another beer, eyes reddening with something deeper than alcohol. Angela set her utensils down. "I'm going to call Cole. Just let him know I'm here, in case anything happens." She pulled out her phone, no signal. She rebooted it. Still nothing. Too deep in the woods. She looked up, trying to stay calm. "Landline?" "Disconnected months ago," Mark muttered, not looking at her. "Too expensive. No one to call." Angela's heartbeat quickened. "Mark, can you take me home?" "We're not done eating," he said without looking up. "We're not done talking." She took a step back. "I just need some air." "Sit down." His voice changed. No longer a suggestion, a command. Angela froze. Something in his eyes had shifted. Something darker, colder. Beneath the grief and the bitterness, there was something else. Something dangerous. "Morgan was everything to me," Mark said, voice cracking, "and you destroyed all of it." Angela took another step back, her heel hitting the leg of a chair. The divorce didn't make Morgan disappear. What do you know about cause and effect? Mark snapped. One action triggers another. Divorce, a new man, a broken home. Then, poof, Morgan's gone. He stood suddenly, swaying slightly, still gripping his beer. Angela seized the moment and darted toward the door, but Mark was faster than he looked. He blocked her path, body wide and immovable. "Where you going?" His voice dropped into something low and dangerous. Angela tried to sidestep, but he grabbed her arm tight, cold. "Let go of me," she shouted. "You want the truth?" he hissed. "That oven in the garage, I bought it to replace the one I used for Morgan." The words shattered the air. "I kept her," he continued, "for 3 years, in the basement, while you were out there playing house, moving on like we never existed." Angela tried to scream, but Mark clamped a hand over her mouth. She bit him, hard. Blood filled her mouth. He swore but didn't let go. He dragged her toward the stairs. "You want to see where she really lived?" he growled. "Time for you to understand." Angela kicked and fought, but he shoved her down the wooden steps. Each one struck like thunder, and at the bottom, where the dim light bled into shadows, a door waited, and behind that door, a truth no one was meant to survive. Angela slammed hard onto the concrete floor as she tumbled down the final steps of the basement. Pain shot through her ribs and knees. The overhead bulb cast a dim, pale light that painted the cold space in a sickly hue. The air was dense and stale, tinged with rust, mold, and something faintly sweet like the remnants of a memory rotting from within. As her eyes adjusted, the room came into focus, and the breath caught in her throat. To her left was a small chamber, no larger than a child's bedroom. The concrete walls were painted a fading pink, chipped in corners. Against one wall sat a child-sized bed, fitted with Disney princess sheets still vibrant in color. A soft rug covered the floor, scattered with picture books, workbooks, and pages filled with a child's handwriting sloppy at first, then gradually more refined. Shelves lined with toys, stuffed animals, dolls in hand-sewn clothes, an electronic alphabet board, a tiny keyboard. Angela stood frozen. Morgan had lived here. Her daughter had been held in this basement while the world searched for her above. While Angela gave tearful interviews on television, printed flyers, begged the public for clues. Morgan had been locked below, breathing stale air, learning math, reading books, all inside a room built by the man Angela had once called husband. Mark descended the stairs slowly behind her, his hand gripping the railing like he was descending into a shrine. His eyes swept the room not with regret, but nostalgia. He positioned himself at the base of the stairs, blocking her path back up. "Welcome to Morgan's home away from home," he said, his voice thick with pride and bitterness. 3 years, Angela. She lived right here while you were filing papers, going on dates, building a new life, and I was building this. Angela took a step back. "You're insane." Mark didn't flinch. "I started planning the day you stopped looking at me the same way. I watched your routines. I knew you always did laundry Monday afternoons. I knew you stayed inside for at least 30 minutes. That day, I took a long lunch, drove home, parked in the garage. When Morgan came near the gate, I called her over, told her Daddy had a surprise." Angela whispered, "She followed you?" With a smile, Mark replied. "She trusted me. I brought her here, told her Mommy didn't want us anymore, that you'd chosen someone else. She cried for weeks, screamed, pounded the walls. But then, she adjusted. I homeschooled her, played games, breakfast at 8, math at 10, reading after lunch." "You imprisoned her?" Angela hissed. "I saved her," Mark snapped. "I was the father you never let me be present, patient, focused. You know what? She never stopped asking about you every day. Does Mommy miss me? Is Mommy looking for me? And then one day, she said if I didn't take her home, she'd hurt herself." Angela's body trembled. "She stopped eating, pretended to faint, started hiding notes, told me she'd find a way to make me sorry. You know what I did?" She stared at him, her mouth dry. I made her favorite juice apple with grape. I laced it with sleeping pills. That afternoon, during story time, she got drowsy. I told her there were monsters outside, that she had to hide in a special safe place. The oven. Angela screamed. "Stop!" She climbed in, Mark went on, unblinking. With her favorite bunny. I sealed the door, turned the heat on low, propped a chair against it, just in case, but she never woke up. The sedatives took care of that. Carbon monoxide did the rest. Angela collapsed to her knees, sobbing. I waited hours, Mark continued, his voice strangely calm. Then I sealed the oven. That night I drove to the swamp, waded into the mud and buried it where no one would ever find it. You killed her, Angela wept. You murdered your own child. I'm her father, Mark replied coldly. And you made it happen. You left us. You replaced us. Angela's eyes darted around. Near a corner workbench was a hammer-wooden handle, steel head. Mark was still facing the room, monologuing. His back turned. She didn't think. She moved. She grabbed the hammer and, with a cry that came from the deepest place in her soul, swung it as hard as she could. The sickening thud echoed off the concrete walls. Mark dropped instantly. The beer bottle in his hand shattered. Blood pooled beneath his head. Angela didn't check if he was alive. She bolted past his body, scrambled up the stairs, her hands shaking as she searched for keys. There, on the kitchen counter. She snatched them, flung the door open, jumped into the truck and gunned the engine. Tires skidded across the damp earth, tree branches scraping the sides as she tore down the forest road. In the rearview mirror, the cabin shrank behind her, the place where Morgan had lived and died. Angela drove like a woman possessed, her blood-streaked hands gripping the steering wheel, her eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror, even though she knew Mark wasn't coming after her. Every pothole, every tight curve jolted her, but she kept going, as if her entire body had clenched around the need to hold herself together. 10 minutes down the mountain road, her phone lit up with a single signal bar. Without hesitating, she pulled to the side and dialed emergency services. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Angela Palmer, she said, voice raw. I'm on Mountain Road near Deer Lake. My ex-husband, Mark Palmer. He kept our daughter in a basement for 3 years. He confessed. He murdered her. I hit him with a hammer. He's still at the cabin. I don't know if he's alive. Ma'am, please slow down. Are you safe right now? Yes, I'm in his truck. I escaped. But he kept Morgan locked underground. And then he put her in an oven and buried her in the swamp. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly to full alert. We're sending units to both your location and the cabin. Stay on the line. Are you injured? Angela could only shake her head, tears streaming down her face. She relayed every detail, the address of the cabin, what she saw, what she heard, the model number of the oven, the layout of the basement. Her voice wavered, cracked, but never stopped. Through it all, she clutched the wheel like a lifeline. 20 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights filled the forest around her. Angela stepped out of the truck, pale, trembling, her hands and collar still stained with blood. Officers stormed the cabin. Inside, they found Mark Palmer unconscious in the basement, his head gashed, blood pooled around him, but he was still alive. Paramedics began stabilizing him while forensic teams began processing the horrific scene. They documented the pink-painted basement, the tiny bed, the shelves of toys, and a hand-drawn calendar where Morgan had marked 1,295 days. At the Woodland police station, Angela sat in a quiet interview room, wrapped in a blanket, hands still shaking. Across from her sat Detective Daniel Cole, his face ashen, fury glinting in his eyes. "Miss Palmer," he said gently, "I can't imagine what you've been through, but I need you to walk me through every detail." It took over 2 hours for Angela to tell him everything. The dinner, the beer, the shift in Mark's demeanor, his threats, the revelation about the oven, the push down the stairs, the pink room, the bedtime routines, the juice laced with pills, and the final horror. Morgan crawling into the oven, holding her stuffed rabbit, never waking up. By the end, her voice was barely more than a whisper. Cole sat back, his jaw clenched. "We found it all," he said finally. "The room, the toys, the calendar Morgan made 3 years, marked off in crayon. And Mark, he's awake. He's talking. He's confessing." Angela stopped breathing for a second. "He's telling us everything. We have it all on tape. He described watching you after the divorce, the way he studied your schedule, how he built the basement, soundproofed it, stocked it with school supplies, and then how he planned her death when she started resisting." Cole opened his notebook, voice tightening. He said, and I quote, "She was getting too smart, too strong. Just like her mother, I couldn't risk her escaping. So I decided." Angela buried her face in her hands, body racked with tremors. He described mixing the sedatives, the temperature settings, the chair against the oven door. We found internet searches on his computer, how to die painlessly, how long until carbon monoxide kills. He said he wanted her death to be quiet, but what he really wanted was to punish you. Angela didn't respond. There were no words, only a hollow that stretched into the deepest parts of her soul. "He wanted you to imagine her final moments," Cole said, "to see that image every time you closed your eyes." He leaned forward, eyes firm. "But now he'll never leave prison. We're charging him with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and first-degree murder. And he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. No more Morgan to control. No more you to manipulate." Angela gave a small, numb nod. The words didn't soothe her, but they mattered. They were real. A young officer opened the door. "Detective, the media's here. They're asking for confirmation." Angela stood slowly, shrugging the blanket from her shoulders. "I'll speak to them," she said. "They need to hear it. They need to know that sometimes the monster isn't a stranger. It's someone who once kissed you goodnight." The press conference was held at 10 a.m. the next morning on the steps of the Woodland Police Department. The sky was overcast, the air thick with tension and the rapid clicks of cameras. Reporters from local stations crowded in, microphones extended toward the wooden podium where Angela Palmer stood, her head held high, her eyes red but dry. Beside her was Detective Daniel Cole, his expression stern, jaw tight. "My name is Angela Palmer," she began, voice clear and unwavering. "My daughter, Morgan, disappeared 3 years ago, and today we found her." Shutters snapped like gunfire. Angela didn't flinch. "We didn't find her in the woods, or in the hands of a stranger. We found her beneath the floor of a cabin held there, hidden, by her own father. She was imprisoned for 3 years, stripped of her childhood, and then she was murdered." Silence fell over the crowd like a sheet of glass. Angela looked directly into the cameras. "We, like so many families, believed the danger came from outside, from someone in the shadows. But the truth was far more terrifying. The man who killed my daughter once kissed me goodnight, once called her princess. Sometimes the monster doesn't come from outside. Sometimes he lives in your house." Cole placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Angela continued, her voice thick but steady. "I'm not here to tell a tragedy. I'm here to issue a warning. If something feels wrong, listen to that feeling. If something seems off, don't ignore it. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they're incapable of evil. Morgan paid the ultimate price for the silence around her. I don't want another child to suffer the same fate." She stepped down from the podium to a smattering of applause, quiet, respectful, charged with emotion. No one asked follow-up questions. No one dared. The story had transcended news. It had become a reckoning. 3 months later, in the Cowlitz County Courthouse, Mark Palmer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom heard everything. His taped confession, the evidence from the basement, Morgan's hand-marked calendar, photographs of the red oven. Not once did Mark look at Angela, and when the sentence was read aloud, he didn't flinch. He merely offered a faint, smirkless rebellion, then resignation. as if, at last, someone else was being made to carry the weight of his pain. Angela did not attend the sentencing. She stayed home, the same house where Morgan once played, now being slowly restored room by room. Not to preserve the past, but to make peace with it. She closed Morgan's bedroom door for the last time, then painted her daughter's name on a canvas she hung in the hallway. A bright sky, a white bunny, and the words in her own handwriting, "You live in me forever." She began speaking at community panels on hidden abuse, writing quietly on grief forums for parents of missing children. Her words, once trapped in trauma, now moved through her like light. And on quiet autumn afternoons when the world finally stilled, she would open a drawer and take out a piece of paper Morgan had once written in the basement in shaky purple crayon. "Mommy, I know you're looking for me." Angela would read it again, and again, eyes closed. "Yes, Morgan," she whispered. "I found you, and this time I'm never letting go."